Hey everybody, today we're going to come back with another Rated Battlegrounds beginner guide, and today we're talking about enchants and what are the best in-slot enchantments that you can get for Rated Battlegrounds. This is something that everyone can do, and you can do it just the same way as the pros do, so without any further ado, let's get into it. First, just where do we get enchantments from? You can buy everything you need off the auction house. It costs a little bit of gold. Some enchants might be a little more expensive than others, but believe me, it's worth it, and it's something that you can get one time and you're good for the rest of the year. We're going to start with the biggest one, which is your weapon. So if you are a DPS or a tank and you're not a warlock, a death knight, or a hunter that uses a bow, you're going to run Sophic Devotion. Sophic Devotion is basically a primary stat proc, which will increase your damage, so it's a good thing to have. Warlocks, you're going to be using Wafting Devotion. Wafting Devotion is a haste and speed buff. It's a proc. If you're a hunter that uses a bow, so if that's a Beastmaster hunter or a marksmanship hunter, you want to use high intensity thermal scanner, which is a secondary stat proc buff. And of course, Death Knights don't actually need to buy their enchantment off the auction house because they have Rune Forging. The Rune Forge that you would want for all three Death Knight specs is the Rune of the Fallen Crusader. Basically, it gives you a leech and an increase to your strength. For your cloak enchant, you've got a few options, but the one I'm going to recommend for rated battlegrounds is always the homebound speed. This gives you a speed boost, which is great for rated battlegrounds because you need to cover some ground. So take the speed buff. For your chest enchant, there are basically 4 different enchants that depend on which spec you're using. So for some DPS specs, you want to be using Waking Stats, which is a straight increase to your primary stats. I'll put it on the screen, the different specs that use it, but basically it's your Demon Hunters, your DPS and your Tank Druids, your DPS for your Evoker, Mages, Prot, Ret Paladins, Shadow Priest, all 3 Warlock specs, your DPS Shaman, and an Arms Warrior. Want to be running Waking Stats on your chest piece. The other option for your chest piece is Sustained Strength. This would be for mostly the Death Knights, Furious Warriors, and Prot Warriors. Increases your strength and stamina. Some people will run Waking Stats instead of Sustained Strength, so it's a bit of a personal preference, but yeah, sustained strength for Death Knights is a viable option as well. If you're a hunter, a rogue, a DPS or tank monk, you want to be running accelerated agility, which is a straight agility and speed increase. And finally, for the chest enchants, if you're a healer, Holy Paladin, Mistweaver, Preservation Evoker, Restoration Druid, Restoration Shaman, Disc Priest, or Holy Priest, you want to be running Reserve of Intellect. This is an intellect boost as well as a increase to your mana pool. So healer is going to run reserve of intellect on your chest. Your wrists or bracers. Again, there's a few different enchants here. For rated battlegrounds, I'm always going to recommend the speed for all specs. Again, it just gives you the ability to cover more ground, which will help you in rated battleground. In the waist belt slot, definitely want to go with the shadowed belt clasp. You don't really have too many options here, so this one just gives you a little more stamina. For legs, there's 3 different enchants that people are going to be using depending on their spec. So if you are a DPS or a tank spec and you're not a caster range DPS, then likely you're going to be using the Fierce Armor Kit. Again, I'll put the specs on the screen so you can see which ones I recommend here. Fierce Armor Kit is basically a permanent buff to your stamina and then either your agility or your strength. If you're a range DPS caster and that uses intellect. This is your warlocks, your mages, Ellie Shaman, Shadow Priest, and your evokers. Then you want to use Frozen Spell Thread. It's going to increase your intellect and your stamina. Last on the legs, if you are a healer spec, you're going to run Temporal Spell Thread. This is an intellect increase, and it also increases your maximum mana. So perfect for healers is the Temporal Spell Thread on your legs. In your feet slot, you want to be running Plains Runner Breeze. This is going to increase your speed again. This is good for all specs. And last, we have rings. You can enchant 2 rings, obviously. There's 4 enchants. They all buff a secondary stat: versatility, mastery, haste, or critical strike. Um, on this one, it's a bit tough because it depends more on what your ideal stats are and what your current stats are on your player. So if you are above the line for diminishing returns, which is say 30%, then it doesn't make sense to take more of that stat. You might want to opt for your next best stat. Um, to make it simple though in PvE, versatility is always good. So if you're not sure what the best stat is for your class or where kind of like you can put in that additional secondary stat, then you really can't go wrong with the devotion of versatility and just stack versatility for PvP. So that's it for all the enchants. Just a quick shout out to Murloc.io, super useful website. They show what the top 50 top 50 players are in different types of content: solo shuffle, arena, rated battlegrounds, even mythic plus. So if you're ever wondering at any point what the best in slot enchantments are for your spec or any spec, go check out Murloc.io, and you can usually see what the current meta is that people are using for their enchants. That's it for this guide. Thanks for watching.